City Planner Plays City Builders. We are building the city of Verde Beach. And this city is going to be quite a bit different than the other playthrough that I'm currently working on, Bluffside Crossing, in that this will be a mostly vanilla playthrough. Now I say mostly vanilla because I am using a couple mods to improve the visuals, and those mods can be seen here. But outside of that, I'm not using any mods that would modify my gameplay. I do have all of the downloadable content installed as well as all of the creators packs. But beyond that, everything I will be doing here will be vanilla and should be applicable to both vanilla PC players and console players alike. I'm going to work to naturally progress through the gameplay, creating a detailed, natural, and well-planned city. I'm going to build each industry, all modes of transportation, each park type, every unique building, and lastly, each monument. And this build won't be completed until I reach those goals. I'm also going to upload a save every 5th episode so that you can play around with my save if that's something you want to do. So without any further ado, let's get started. So the first thing I like to do is kind of survey the landscape and check out my surroundings and try to understand where I might want to build in the future. And I think the natural place to contemplate with this particular build is going towards that peak over there. So that would mean crossing the river at some point. When I'm building cities, I like to keep things, fairly natural. So first, we need an entryway into the city, and some people will plan with a freeway in mind. That is not my playing style. The primary reason for that is, most communities, if they were to be formed right now, probably wouldn't form on the interstate. They'd form on, a state highway, a 2-lane road, and go from there. And that road would be the main street. And eventually, the interstate would come to the community if it were needed and merited. So I'm going to point what will eventually be the main arterial in our old town. They're kind of going through the city, pointing towards where I want to go in the future. So I've gone straight a bit, then I'm going to arrow this or angle this, and then point it directly to where I want to cross the river. And I tried to choose a location that's not overly wide. Unfortunately, it's going to be a little wider than I think would be best, but it'll work. And I'm going to bring this right up to the shoreline because I'm going to use this as the launching point for my neighborhoods. This is going to be the only paved road that I use for a while. And the primary reason for that is if you look at the upkeep and cost of a 2-lane gravel road, it's exactly half of that of a 2-lane road. And we're not going to have maintenance facilities for a while. We're not going to have a lot of money for a long time. So being as frugal and stingy with our finances is going to be incredibly important. I also want to be able to expand the city and grow and create a bit of a grid to start out with. And I know that I will be able to do twice as much utilizing the dirt roads that I would otherwise be able to do with a paved road. So with that being said, I've given some thought about the size of the grid that I want to use in this community. And in Bluffside Crossing, I used a 10 by 20 grid. It's easy. The guidelines naturally lead you towards a grid that size. It's efficient. But I think in this city, I want to use something that's more efficient than that even. And the grid that I've settled on is a 15 by 12 grid. And that might sound weird to you. First of all, to go 15 tiles across, it's going to be $300. And to go 12 up, it'll be $240. So why this grid, you might ask? Well, the primary reason is that a lot of the special buildings will completely encompass this grid. Further, I can divide this in half and then zone half of each side of this to create smaller lot sizes, which will help us create buildings that accommodate residents at a wide variety of income levels. And that's pretty important to me. I think it's really important that a community is able to support residents of a variety of income levels. And that's what Verde Beach is going to aim for. So we're going to create a small grid going $300 over and 12 up, and kind of use the cost to be our guide. So 300, 240, 300, 240. And that's going to be our guiding principle. We're going to try to work with the landscape, but at the same time have a structured and regimented grid. So I'm going to try to not overly encroach upon the water banks. This is probably a little tighter than it should be, but I'll try to avoid doing that as much as possible. So to start out with, it's just going to be a real small grid. So I'm going to complete a few blocks now. Okay, in addition to this grid over here, I want to have another grid that mirrors these banks of the river over here. And I want the same grid to do that. So I'm going to, again, go 300 over and 240 up. Okay, now I want to line these up. So I'm going to use the freeform tool to try to come up with a solution that will allow me to get these roads kind of as nice looking as they could be. And this can be tricky, but if you're diligent, you can make it happen. That's probably as good as it's going to get there. I'm going to do a little bit more grid building before I start the city. This is probably one of the more unrealistic things that I'm going to do today. The main reason for that is normally a city wouldn't have any roads, that it would naturally progress. The developer would build the roads as they're needed, not the city coming in and just kind of building a nice natural little grid for the community to start on. But for our purposes, I think it's going to work out very well. Okay, so I've built this area, and I've done this purposefully. I want to delete it. So this is going to be our first park space. Now, there are a couple ways you can factor in park space. You could just kind of find a nice natural area, such as this forested area over here. Because this is vanilla, it's going to be difficult to plop this many trees. So that might be something you want to contemplate, creating a nice park space over here. Alternatively, you can use your grid to carve out a large chunk of land to create a city park. And that's what I want to do in the beginning, is create a city park here. So that's why I have this here. This road right here might not even exist in the future. Generally, this would be something I would strongly avoid because I know personally how difficult it is to vacate right of way. It's a highly structured process that state governments dissuade cities from pursuing. They don't want cities kind of giving development land back to developers all willy-nilly like. They would greatly prefer that land is given back only in extreme circumstances. And this, I'm going to say this is an extreme circumstance. I might be a little facetious there. Okay. So I am pleased with how this turned out. I think that we have a nice starting point. Actually, I want to be really pleased with how this turned out. So I'm just going to finish this and put myself in a precarious financial situation, because that's what I do. When I start cities, I always find myself in these situations. It's because I love the ability to build out a quick grid. So let's actually go back to this view for a second. So thinking about where our industry, well, first of all, we probably should connect this up. That's going to be a necessity, otherwise no one's going to get into the city to live. So let's take care of that. Eliminate that little turnaround and get these to be one ways. Okay, so at this point, I think it's a good time to start thinking about where we'll lay out our first zoning districts. So the most valuable land is not available to us. It's going to be along the shore. So I want high value property to be on the shore. So I'm not going to put industrial there just yet. In the future, we'll probably get to that. But right now, let's keep our residential uses to the shorefront. I do want to make sure that we're preserving some shorefront for the public. So I'm not going to zone all of the shore, and I'm not even going to zone, like what I see here. I can see that I can zone the water. I'm not going to do that. I want to keep the shore looking natural, prevent flooding. Along our main drag, this is going to be Main Street, and why don't we just make that so now? Main Street is going to be our main commercial thoroughfare. So we're going to put commercial uses along Main Street, and we're going to want to keep our industrial uses close to the interstate if at all possible, so that our residential uses don't have industrial driving through them. So I think that we're going to start our industrial up here. So that means that when we're placing our water, we're going to want to make sure we keep it as far away from here as possible. So I'm actually going to start out with water, and I want to place this in a location that kind of makes some sense. So let's first start out. All of these little squares in the middle are either going to be pedestrian paths or places to put things like water, or places that we could divide up a neighborhood. So I think that I'm going to start out and put a water pump in this general area. And some people will use eco water outlets. I'm not a fan. I think it's difficult to treat the water later on down the line. It takes a long time. I'd rather use an inland water treatment plant inside of my industrial district. So I am going to place that within the industrial district. So I'll place that right about here. And the nice thing is we can kind of naturally divide this area so we have the maximum zonable area in that particular place. We're also going to need power, and that'll probably be the last thing that we really need. And you can see that wind is available in a variety of locations. But what I'm noticing is that this little peninsula right here has a good potential to produce a vast amount of wind power for us. 8 megawatts. So I'm going to place a couple of these. I don't want to overdo it to start out with. And we're going to cross the river here to get to that. Now it's going to be important that we create a path from our power lines to our water lines right off the bat. Same is going to be true for our sanitary. We're going to want something that for a water treatment plant as well, and make sure that we're getting power there. So I'm going to cross over here, try to make clean connections to each of our core facilities. Next, we're going to need some water pipes. Now, I like to make sure that all of my snap twos are off, and the main reason for that is water pipes go under roads. They don't kind of go willy-nilly wherever we want. And they maximum generally will turn at 45-degree angles, at least from my understanding. If there's anyone out here that works at a utility company and tells me I got that wrong, I will accept that. But we want to keep that underneath roads as much as we can. And I want to try to space this so that if I do have gaps, they're underneath roads, not underneath parcels. And what you'll see is this is very efficient in covering each of the areas without covering everything. So we're actually going to be able to have fewer water pipes in the long run, and certainly fewer than I normally have in the cities that I build, because we aren't going to be placing water pipes underneath every other road. So there's going to be a little area that's not covered, and that's completely fine. So now that we have that set up, We need to make sure we connect our utilities. Let's just get that out to here. And we will also want to connect up our water tower. Now in the future, so this, you can't have a water main underneath a home, so we'll probably want to put a path through here. You can have an easement underneath a path. If a water main break were to occur, you could certainly dig up a path. You can't dig up a house though. So now on to zoning. And like I said, we're going to want to make sure that our zoning leads to a connection being made. So I'm going to zone all the way over to our water pump, and we're ready to let this go. Aha! We probably should make sure that our power lines are connected to our new power plants. So now we are connected, and what you'll see is we immediately have demand for each type of industry. I want to start satisfying this demand, but I also want to remain true to the plan that we set up. And I want to keep in mind that in the future we're going to want to create neighborhoods. So I'm going to zone, and actually I'm going to de-zone these areas for a couple paths to come through in the future. Before buildings plop up and I have to delete them, let's just be a little more intentional and thoughtful about the zoning. Now I mentioned that this area is going to be a future park, so I want to make sure that I keep that clear for that future park. And we'll also need utilities going down Main Street. So in my previous build, I didn't do a very good job of naming streets. When cities are rapidly developing, they will sometimes just kind of use a pattern naming roads after surroundings or naming them sequentially. I think we're going to start out with River Street along the river, and then kind of go up sequentially with numbered streets. So we also have our north-south streets, and so we have Main. And I might just name these. You know, I think it might be neat to have an alphabetical naming scheme. Okay, so this is going to be one thing I'm going to try to pay attention to in this build as well, is being intentional about our streets. And I think that a little bit of attention to detail will force me to do a better job. So obviously at this point we could continue to zone residential. It's a need. I'm going to do a little bit of that, and then we are in dire need of some industrial. Okay, so let's get some industrial zoned. And at this point, we just kind of need to look at our RCI meters and make sure that we're meeting the needs of the city. And there are going to be some things that aren't even a requirement right now. Things like healthcare, death care, trash collection. Not even a concern of the city at this point. Too small, but we're almost to our first progression milestone where some of those things will become a priority. Now that I'm thinking about this isn't a very well balanced. Oh, our first milestone, Little Hamlet, gave us some extra money. We have the ability to raise and lower taxes, take out loans, garbage collection, healthcare, educational buildings are available. We have medical clinics, elementary schools, landfills, recycling centers, and community schools. So this is a great improvement. So I do want to, before I proceed, divide one of these neighborhood, one of these blocks in half. And I'm going to do that very purposefully. Number one, I want to create a neighborhood commercial area. So I'm going to do that by zoning smaller blocks in this area with commercial. And I also want smaller lots for the homes. So I'm going to get that ready. And in the meantime, start thinking about our healthcare and educational facilities. Now, clearly, it would be great to have this on Main Street, but I don't want all of the traffic from this healthcare facility loading directly onto Main Street. And I know that this will be a collector in the future, not a local road, so I know I want to set it back at least one unit so I don't have to move this building in the future. So I'm placing it on River Street just off Main. Next, our Sims are going to need education. And we've divided this neighborhood in half, and that does... it would be neat to have it in the neighborhood, but I think that it would be even better to have it just outside of the neighborhood with a walking path behind it. So I think that we're going to place the elementary school there, and right now it provides access to all the citizens in the community. In addition, we are going to need to be able to deal with our trash collection. So for the time being, I'm going to leave it without trash collection. I'm going to fix that soon once we have enough to be able to afford a recycling center. If at all possible, I would like to avoid the landfill. I know a lot of communities have them, but they're not really usable in this game. And in fact, if I can't raise the money fast enough, which I could take a look at my utilities and potentially bump things down, I like to steer clear of that because I generally forget about it and end up running into a rough time. So I think I'm just going to leave it on and let this sim for a minute until I have enough to place a recycling center. And if things start to break down, then I will just take out a loan to take care of it right off the bat. Okay, so now we have enough for our recycling center, and it couldn't come at a better time. We are having a number of issues occurring simultaneously that we're going to want to deal with. This seems like a good place for the recycling center because it's not going to impact the commercial buildings, but will still provide good access to the residential buildings. We are having power problems at this point, so we're going to need to remedy that soon. A new wind turbine is $6,000, and we're in kind of a rough spot for money. So what I'm going to do is just kind of increase our capacity for the time being so that we have increase our budget there so we have the capacity to continue to grow and fix that budget setting as soon as I have the ability to place another windmill. So you can see that there is strong residential demand at this point, so we're going to need to continue to build residential buildings. Now that this is filled in a little bit, I want to continue zoning in this area. What you can tell right off the bat is that these residences are smaller. Whoop, Worthy Village. All right, so we have new areas available. We're not going to take advantage of that for the time being. We have districts, policies, second loan, district specializations, which we are going to start taking advantage of, service policies, emergency services, such as the police department and fire department, unique buildings, a couple of industry specializations such as forestry and ag, self-sufficient buildings, organic and local produce, some policies that we can apply to our districts. So it's certainly a good upgrade. And a couple, let's see, do we have any? Panda Sanctuary and the Temple Complex. And the Oriental Pearl Tower. So I guess we have a couple things that we could build if we had the money to do so, which we obviously aren't going to for quite some time. Okay, so now we can add another windmill over here. And I think I'm going to just build two right off the bat and then take our electricity percentage down. Some people might decide to leave it up. I know that it doesn't have any practical impact on the way that the city operates or that the windmills operate, but I just struggle with this because I feel like if you were overutilizing the windmills like that, there would be some negative consequences to the windmill, their useful life and operational life. I feel like that would be dramatically lessened by using them at a higher rate than they're actually intended to be used. So that's why I generally don't do that. So certainly something you could critique me for, but it's just how I feel. So I'm trying to carefully go through and plan out where my residential properties along the waterfront will be. I don't want to zone everything. I don't want flooding issues. I don't want an unnatural waterfront. I want this to kind of flow naturally, and to do that, I'm trying to size the lots appropriately. So that's kind of the intention there. I'm still avoiding this area. I think that we are going to need to expand our residential over to this part of town. Now, I think that one of the things I'm going to want to do is, knowing that there's going to be a border with this industrial area, I'm going to want to cut the lot sizes in half again. So I'm thinking that there could be a commercial corridor bordering this industrial area to kind of break up those industrial uses from the residential uses and to provide kind of a natural buffer. So I'll place that there. So let's see. We're also going to want to start thinking about our protective services. So similar to what I did over here, I could certainly just demolish one of these buildings and throw a police department on there. I don't want to do that though. So I'm looking at my roadway network, and it looks like 3rd Street provides good access to both sides of Main Street. So I'm going to place a police department there, and I'll have to wait for a fire department. Unfortunately, we don't have the funding available to actually build one of those. So back to zoning. So we are still in pretty dire need of residential zoning. So again, I'm going to zone half of the available tiles. And get some smaller residences to develop there. So I think that this will create more of an affordable housing district, which is something that I think is incredibly desirable. You want people to be able to afford the places that they work next to, and this will exist into the future. So, it's going to be a good thing for the community, not just now, but later on down the line as well. So I'll extend some water services down because there's a need at this point. And again, you'll notice it doesn't cover the road. That's one of the beautiful things about this grid pattern that we've established. So again, I guess I want to start thinking about some smaller scale retail in the neighborhood. You can't do mixed use in this game, but you can certainly, at least not vertical mixed use, but you can certainly do horizontal mixed use by mixing things up in neighborhoods. And now we've reached Tiny Town, and a lot of things are opening up to us. Industrial areas, landscaping tools, events, park policies, parks in general, industry areas, the fishing industry, which will be great in this particular build, some unique buildings, football, concerts, a variety of policies, some of the paths, some more roads, including some industry roads, canals, fences, high school, lots of parks. So quite a few things are available to us. So we're going to want to take advantage of these things in the near future. But for the time being, let's continue where we have been going. And then I want to start getting some of these paths laid. So looking through our neighborhoods. I'm going to take off, because I don't want to get this trapped in one of the tiles, I'm just going to turn off all snap twos. Maybe angle will be the one that I don't. No, that's still not going to... How about road guidelines? Yeah, none of them are... I'll just leave them all off. And I want to start putting some paths through here. We'll probably put some trees going through here. And I just think it's going to create a nice atmosphere in the community. It's going to encourage pedestrian activity, and that's something that is really important. In some communities, you'll see alleys, and these are used in the same way. In others, you will just see a lot of pedestrian paths. And it's a way of really prioritizing pedestrianism and providing a way for people to get around outside of their cars, which honestly in America we don't do a great job of. So I am going to demolish that building. I hate doing that, and I'm going to try to not do that as much as possible. So I think I'm going to wrap this video up by finishing off these paths and then kind of taking an inventory of where we've come so far today. Okay, and this is one of the things that's challenging about the vanilla game is sometimes you want to do something and it seems so easy, but you can't do it because it's not available because of snapping. So you kind of have to just play with it and get it to be as good as it can get. So let's finish out our zoning before we kind of take inventory of things. Okay, and power is becoming a limiting factor again. So the nice thing is we're in a good spot financially, and now I think that we can look at our other services, and we shouldn't forget about these before we go. So I'm going to also place the fire department. So see that we have a nice place in our industrial district. Oh, shoot. Actually, that is in the middle of our grid, unfortunately, so I'm going to move this. That'll be a mulligan. This is also a good place for it. And we should also, so I talked about the pedestrian paths. Those aren't exclusive to residential areas. People should be able to walk in their workplaces too, on their lunch breaks or to get to work. So that I'd like to make sure that there's the ability to walk in these areas as well. Now I do notice that I inadvertently zoned in this area, so that's mulligan number 2. And 3. And 4. But I think it's worth it in the long run. So I think we can fill in the last bit of our zoning and then take a look at where we are at. So we've got a nice little community with lots of demand. Our city services are met. Actually, they're not. We don't have a high school. So let's, once again, take a minute. We will take some open land, place the high school there. And the nice thing is, we can put a path right behind it and along the side of it to get students to and from school. So I think this creates a nice little area for the high school. So we have most of our city services in a good place. And as I say that, we have our power system breakdown again. Where were we? We are in a good place with our financial system, or with our most of our city systems. We have a nice little city that's growing rapidly. Demand is strong. The city coffers are growing, and things are laid out well. I think that we've thoughtfully planned this initial area. In the coming episodes, we're going to want to start creating neighborhoods, make this big city park, and really start thinking about where we are going to head next. and that's not going to be across the water for a little while. We're going to want to fill out this area. The water is a significant barrier, as would be this highway, and as a result, you wouldn't see development crossing the highway or going across the water until absolutely necessary. So I'm going to leave it here. Thank you so much for joining me. Let me know what you think about this, if this is something that you're interested in. I hope that this content is helpful and useful. I've seen in the comments of Bluffside Crossing that people are really thirsting for a vanilla build, and I hope that this kind of satiates that need and is something that you're interested in. So if you like this video, please consider liking it. If you aren't subscribed to my channel, please consider subscribing. And if you want to be notified of when I make new videos, please hit that notification bell. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.